You spend years nurturing an apricot tree, doing everything right, and then, boom, in a matter of days, it completely collapses and dies. It is absolutely heartbreaking, and honestly, it's one of horticulture's most notorious mysteries. Welcome to this explainer. We're going to unpack the devastating phenomenon known as apricot apoplexy. Just to put the scale of this into perspective, agricultural records out of Central Europe show an annual tree loss of 2 to 7% directly caused by this sudden silent killer. We're not just talking about a couple of weak saplings dying off here. We're talking massive economic losses for commercial growers and endless frustration for us backyard gardeners. Entire orchards are literally having their lifespans slashed because of this sudden decline. So it begs the ultimate question, right? Why do healthy, thriving apricot trees just suddenly wilt and die? Today, we're going to treat this like a botanical medical mystery. We're looking at the forensic evidence, naming the culprits, and most importantly, giving you the exact, actionable steps you need to keep your trees from meeting a really sudden end. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the apoplexy mystery itself, then look at the culprits, pathogens, and stress. After that, we'll diagnose tree decline, jump into treatment and prevention, and wrap up with some expert tips. All right, part 1, the apricot apoplexy mystery. Let's understand the sudden tree decline. Okay, let's dive into this. Apricot apoplexy actually isn't a single infection. It's a complex syndrome. Think of it more like a catastrophic chain reaction. It's the synergistic interaction of host susceptibility, which is just the genetics of the tree itself, pathogens like fungi and bacteria, and environmental stress. Basically, when these three things align, the tree experiences a sudden branch or even total tree collapse. It is the ultimate perfect storm in the botanical world. Moving right along to Section 2, the culprits, pathogens, and stress. We call this the disease triangle. In phytopathology, there's this core concept called the disease triangle. For apoplexy to strike, you absolutely need all three sides of this triangle to connect. First up, pathogens. We're dealing with opportunistic fungi, primarily Valsaria incisiva, which you might know as cytospore, plus Pseudomonas bacteria. These guys are everywhere, practically hovering around your garden, just waiting for an invite. Second is host susceptibility. This comes down to the specific apricot cultivar you planted and the rootstock it was grafted onto. And third, environmental stress. Think microscopic tissue damage from spring frosts, roots suffocating in waterlogged soil, or open pruning wounds. A healthy tree can usually fight off the pathogens, but you add a bad environment and vulnerable genetics, the tree's defenses completely throw in the towel.
And this brilliantly illustrates how your choices at the garden center can actually seal your tree's fate before you even dig a hole. The research shows incredible variability in genetic resistance. Take cultivars like Bergeron and Silvercott, they've shown really high susceptibility to apoplexy. Plus, the traditionally popular myrobalan rootstock is incredibly risky. Studies actually show up to a 30% infection rate. But on the flip side, safer alternatives exist. Rootstocks like Waxhaw and Wangenheim show dramatically lower incidence rates, dropping that risk down to as low as 2 to 5%. Huge difference, right?
Now here's a bit of a paradox. Apoplexy doesn't usually target old, dying trees. It actually targets trees right in their prime. The most dangerous developmental window is right between years 3 and 6. Why? Well, young trees are growing incredibly fast and entering full fruit-bearing mode. They have a massive demand for water and nutrients. So, if a fungal pathogen sneaks in and blocks their vascular bundles during this stage, the tree collapses fast because it just doesn't have the vast root system or the energy reserves of an older tree. But if your tree can make it past year 10, it can often survive chronic infections for decades. Section 3. Diagnosing tree decline. Let's learn how to spot the forensic evidence. Now, what's really interesting about this is this gooey substance. It's called gummosis, and it's actually the tree's panicked immune response. When the tree's bark gets irritated by frost damage, pruning wounds, or a fungal invasion, it literally bleeds this gum. Early on, it might be clear, but as the fungal infection from cytospora really takes hold, especially after rainy spring weather, that gum turns a dark amber or even brown. This excessive dark oozing is a huge red flag that the tree is trying and failing to push a pathogen out of its system. If you were to cut right into an infected branch and look under a microscope, the tree is literally fighting a war inside its own wood. You'd see these wedge-shaped dark areas, that is necrosis or dead tissue, where the fungus is releasing toxins. In a desperate attempt to survive, the tree builds physical walls, called calluses, to compartmentalize the rot. But here's the tragic part. In doing so, It releases so much gum that it completely clogs its own internal plumbing. Water and nutrients get cut off, and the branch above the infection suddenly wilts and dies of thirst. All right, Section 4, Treatment and Prevention. It's time to talk about saving the patient.
So if you spot that gummosis and early leaf wilt, you've got to act fast to surgically remove the infection. First rule, never ever prune in wet weather. Rain splashes easily spread those fungal spores right into your fresh cuts. Second, when you remove a dying branch, you need to cut at least 12 inches below the visibly infected area. The microscopic fungal network extends way further than the dead bark you can actually see. Third, rake up and completely destroy all the infected twigs. Don't just leave them on the ground or they're going to keep producing spores. And fourth, avoid overhead watering. It just mimics the rainy conditions these pathogens absolutely love.
But honestly, the absolute best treatment is prevention, and that means proactively managing the environment so these ubiquitous pathogens never even find an entry point. For starters, avoid planting your apricots in frost hollows. Those are the low-lying areas in your yard where cold air just settles in the spring. Frost creates microscopic cracks in the bark that act like wide-open doors for bacteria. Also, ensure your soil is well-draining. Waterlogged soil literally suffocates the roots, causing a stress condition called asphyxia, making the whole tree super vulnerable. And I can't emphasize this enough, avoid pruning during wet, cold winter weather. Finally, Section 5, Expert Tips and Conclusion. Let's set you up for long-term success. So the crucial point is summarized perfectly by this insight from phytopathology research. Wounds are essential entry points. Believe it or not, these killer fungi like Cytospora are actually pretty weak pathogens in the grand scheme of things. They generally can't penetrate thick, healthy, unbroken bark on their own. They rely almost entirely on us. They rely on our poorly timed pruning cuts, our accidental lawnmower bumps, and the environmental damage that we fail to protect the tree from. Let's move to our key takeaways and see how this all builds together. Remember, apoplexy isn't just random bad luck. It's a complex of a pathogen, a susceptible host, and environmental stress. But you can control this equation. Start by choosing resistant rootstocks like waxaw. Keep a super vigilant eye out for dark gummosis and sudden wilting. If you do have to prune out disease, make sure you do it 12 inches below the canker and strictly in dry weather. And above all else, really baby those young trees during their most vulnerable years 3 through 6, by protecting them from spring frosts and soggy soil. Now, just a quick reminder, this explainer is strictly for informational purposes only. Every orchard and garden microclimate is totally unique. So if you're dealing with severe tree decline, we highly recommend consulting a certified arborist or a local horticultural professional to get advice that's tailored specifically to your soil and local pathogen pressures. As we wrap up today's deep dive into the mystery of apricot apoplexy, I want to leave you with a thought to chew on the next time you head out into the garden with your shears. Knowing that these microscopic killers are hovering in the environment, just waiting for a breach in the tree's armor, are you inadvertently inviting pathogens into your apricot orchard with every winter prune? It might just be time to rethink exactly how and when we care for our trees. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and happy safe gardening.